I hereby call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I'll be taking public comment at this time. Is anyone here in the audience who wishes to provide public comment? Seeing none, I'll ask Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online? No, ma'am. Very good. Anyone have any correspondence to be read in the record for public comment? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our CIP overview. Mr. Miller, would you like to kick it off, please, sir?
Yes, ma'am. So this is the first night of what we hope won't be too many, but we obviously are wanting to get through a number of presentations tonight. You have a agenda and just the overview of the process. What we were hoping to accomplish tonight is a couple of things. One is to allow the department heads and the school superintendent, Dr. Benson, who is here, I see, to make their presentations. Sheriff Giles as well to make their presentations, and then what we're going to do afterwards is we have information about the kind of availability of funding that we have. We have not made any kind of I guess prioritization other than what you have been provided by the Planning Commission in terms of what they did. And so what we want to do is, this is an opportunity for you to get the information, start to form whatever directions you guys want to provide us, and then we can take whatever comments are made tonight or later, and then I guess obviously set up a meeting for the future discussion. So that's kind of what we're going to do. Donna Hahn, our finance director, is going to essentially kind of be the coordinator of all this. She put it all together with the help of the department heads and the other folks that are part of this process. And the Planning Commission, I think just for your benefit, the Planning Commission, we've got a letter that came from Mr. Parker, the chair of the Planning Commission, that talks about the prioritization. But we also have in a spreadsheet format, which I think you have in paper form. You may have it on your computers as well, where it's marked urgent and priority of the Planning Commission. That's what they came back with us based on their review on the 10th of August. So I'm going to turn it over to Donna and then let her go ahead and take care of it.
Okay, so just an overview. Pursuant to the Article 5, 15.2-2239 Code of Virginia, that's what prompts the CIP process. Guide toward the provision of public facilities and equipment, serves as a planning instrument to identify needed capital projects and coordinate the financing and timing of improvements, reviewed and adjusted annually based on current circumstances and opportunities. The CIP process, the county departments receive submittal instructions. The submittals are reviewed by finance and the county administrator for completeness, and then forwarded to the Director of Community Development. The Director of Community Development presents it to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission conducts a public hearing, which was held on August 10th of 2021. Following the public hearing, the Planning Commission provides recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, and that was at their meeting, I believe it was on September 14th. And then it comes to you all to discuss and adopt a 5-year CIP and capital budget and appropriate capital funds for the current year. Now we're going to go, we changed this list here is a little bit different. You want to switch up and let Dr. Benson go?
Yeah, would you like to let Dr. Benson go ahead of us? Yeah. Sure.
Yes. Yes. Next, we'll get into the county departments, and we've got a little bit of a change in the order from here tonight. So now we would like to call Dr. Benson up to the podium to let him go ahead and do his presentation. I don't know if you sent anything to Mr. Dines or if you just were going to talk tonight.
If I could interrupt one thing, I would just point out that a lot of the credit for this obviously goes to department heads and Dr. Benson, Sheriff Giles, Donna, and then I would point out that Travis Quisenberry was part of pulling this all together. So if it goes well, then you can thank Travis. If it doesn't go well, then you can thank Travis. No, I'm kidding you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Benson.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you on behalf of the King George County School Board. I'll proceed much like I did with the Planning Commission. You have a list of needs as far as the schools go projected out for several years. There are four in particular that I just want to bring to your attention. And of course, the preschool I'll dwell on the greatest because that's right now the greatest priority. But first, I don't want to have overlooked the fact that we do have an issue at the middle school in terms of fields lighting. The project, as far as the building itself is complete, to do so required the movement of the softball field from its old site to its current site. Not included in the scope of the project was lighting for that softball field. And I know that softball field is certainly used by the schools, but it is also heavily used externally through Parks and Rec and travel softball and those types of things. So currently it is without lighting. And traveling further down to the baseball field during the project, the track project actually, we discovered the electricity for that baseball field lighting is direct buried. It's not in conduit, and it is probably less than a foot beneath the ground, and so that's high voltage. Right now, it is disabled because we had some issues with the one of the light stanchions or one of the light poles itself. So both fields really are in need if we're going to light the fields. Obviously, for Title IX, we need to make sure both are lit. Both fields are used heavily through the community, through Little League and that type of thing. And they are used in a lighted fashion or have been in the past. So that's one item that I wanted to bring to your attention and put up there to make sure we don't lose sight of the fact that that is a need at that middle school facility. Excuse me. Second, we maintain the need for ADA playgrounds at two of our three elementary schools. We were able to install the one at King George Elementary. We would like to expand that in a phased fashion across the other two elementary schools in the coming years. Also of importance is the school bus replacement, and this board has long held a tradition of trying to make sure we stay on cycle in terms of our most mileaged or most problematic buses, that we look to replace those buses so that at no time in the future we have a suddenly need for 12, 15 buses that we're told are no longer usable type of thing. So I think that's rather intuitive in terms of a strategy, not only a need. Okay, so this brings me to the most urgent need, and I don't think it's a secret to anyone that the current preschool program is housed in the 1939 constructed section of what is the school board office or that area out there on St. Anthony's Road. So the building has served us well, obviously. It has been high school. It has had an annex added to it. So it has served King George over the years, the many, many years, in different fashions and served well. Just prior to my arrival, I believe it was put kind of back together because there was a need to host a preschool program for our early special education students and for the state program in terms of expanding preschool opportunities in our community. I believe that need as far as preschool opportunities is going to continue to grow. It is nationally understood and it is widely strategized that if we can get kids to the start line we have a better chance of keeping them, progressing and doing well and not falling behind. We don't start with a deficit model. So preschool is of great value. And we've participated locally with organizations like Smart Beginnings to bring the very best quality preschool program we can bring to our students. So I'm very proud of that staff. I know they've done exceptional things and continue to do so. At issue then is the facility itself. It is simply an old facility. Some decisions do need to be made about it regardless of whether it's going to be used as a preschool or not in terms of roofing. Interior wise, we have spots where now the plaster is coming loose from the lathe behind it. And so that's going to continue to happen in different parts of the building. The guts of the building are old. The plumbing, in particular, the waste discharge system, and really the waste leaving the building. Currently, it goes out of the building to a pump that is in need of replacement at about $70,000. I have an invoice here, or an estimate. From there, it then travels under Route 3 out back to a beyond the salvage yard to an area there. So there are no cleanouts, plumbing wise. When we have an issue with the plumbing, we literally have to remove the toilet in the faculty room and use that as the cleanout. Just to give you an idea of its age in terms of plumbing. Electrically, it again is electric from the 60s. It just needs to be either upgraded or we really need a more modern, more suitable facility for our preschoolers. So I'm happy to take you on a tour if you want to take a look for yourself. If you want to meet or talk with Gary, our head of maintenance, he has a world of knowledge about the building. But I'll transition from really the deficits or the justification in terms of the existing facility to looking ahead for a facility that would be of use for our students in the future. And I really would strongly recommend that if we do look for a replacement building, we look at something that can be located central, because our preschool kids come from all over the division. So putting something in one end or the other could cause transportation that might be imbalanced kind of thing. So ideally, if we were to look at the old middle school property as a spot where that could be constructed, perhaps behind where the current structure is, but be smart about designing it in such a way that eventually it could complement and it could utilize maybe some of the ancillary spaces or ancillary services, the food in particular, whenever a fourth elementary is needed in King George County. That would make the most sense to me, not just from a central transportation standpoint, but also it could potentially then help to kind of share costs with that fourth elementary school someday. I don't know. That need is not on the near horizon. I do not believe I'd be the superintendent at that point, but I do think I owe it to you all to give you my best thinking, because that is probably a very logical place to put a centralized preschool facility at this point. So I know there are many others to present tonight. I don't want to hog the time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or again, offer an invitation for you to come see the existing facility or chat with folks that have chat with Gary as far as the knowledge of the building itself.
Thank you, Dr. Benson. Question? Any questions? Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Benson, I appreciate you coming out. I'm excited about the idea of having to pay for it, but I'm really glad to see that it's on here. I know that it is needed, so thank you for bringing it forth. Just out of curiosity, the $16.9 figure, how was that? How did you guys come to that?
It's a rough, and quite frankly, I think it's from a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years. It was simply a multiplication of square footage,
Okay.
Existing square footage. I really think that the number would need to be refined through an architect and through a process.
Okay.
But that's just a placeholder.
So you talked about making a new building behind the existing middle school. Has there been any investigation to even seeing if the current middle school could be refurbished? I know it's in pretty rough shape. I probably need a whole new roof, like cut from the top. I think we've talked about it at one point in the past before. We kind of looked into it a little bit, but was that even investigated?
No, there's been no formal investigation.
Okay.
It's simply my idea that more attractive to me than is the location itself, regardless of how the logistics play out, whether that building is raised or modified, or how that works out. I think
Understood. I agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it is centrally located. So from that perspective, there's a lot of logic there. So I appreciate that. I think I'm good for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill, sir.
You answered kind of my other question about the school there. Which fields had direct burial wires you said that you weren't using?
the baseball field at the middle school.
Baseball field at the middle school.
Correct. The field furthest from the actual school itself.
Okay. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender?
Mr. Granger asked the question I was going to ask, because I've mentioned that since I did my infrastructure plan, that it would be the best place for a preschool, and knock down that old middle school and site it properly on there. Does it make sense?
Great minds think alike. Yeah.
Couple questions. First, is there any plan, obviously a new preschool would be a long-term plan, but in the short term, as far as the existing facility, any improvements with regard to HVAC, or you mentioned the waste discharge pump? We have ARPA money that we might be able to use for some of those needs. I know the schools have some that they can use for HVAC, and then on the county side, our money could be used for wastewater types of improvements. So are you all looking at that at all as far as?
Well, we do have, the building itself, when we initiated our energy improvement project, the building itself, each of those rooms received a new barred unit in terms of HVAC, and we actually were able to add conditioning to the hallway spaces. One end of that is very hit or miss, quite frankly. We've just been wrestling with it since it was installed. The rooftop unit and that gym space, again, can be temperamental, I guess. So, but it is not, I don't want to give the impression that it's not a conditioned space. There are a few rooms and areas that seem to repetitively bring up issues, but the equipment itself, those barred units on the outside, were replaced at the same time as far as conditioning space. The discharge pump, Gary continues, we do the prudent things. We work with service authority. Those are issues that we need to work together with them where there's a cost. And in that, I mentioned the $68,000. We kind of been looking at that as, okay, well, we're going to need a new pump to get the waste obviously downstream. We'll continue to do those things. There is a roof need on that end. I believe that at one point the roof was addressed. And again, I think this was the year I came or just prior. However, there was a section, and I think it's the middle section would still need to be addressed in terms of leaks and that kind of thing. That's the kind of the cafeteria space where not only does the preschool or the Head Start use it for like their indoor recess, but JRTC now uses it after hours, as does Parks and Rec for karate and that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So Mr. Miller, can you start a running list of possible ARPA projects? So when we get to where, and I'm sure you all have some things in mind
Yes.
already, but
Yes.
to me, it's downright unacceptable that you all are having to deal with. I'm sure there are other issues going on in that building that you're having to deal with. Quite frankly, I saw the pictures in the Planning Commission packet, but that to me is downright unacceptable that you're having to deal with that. And hopefully we can find a way to use some of the ARPA wastewater money to try to alleviate that situation in the short term, maybe. We'll see. So then I had a few other questions. So remind me, last year we did not do any school bus replacements for you, right? Because of COVID, because we saw that it looked like there wasn't going to be as much wear and tear on the buses last year. We did not.
That's right.
Okay. Then the security cameras for King George Elementary School and Sealston, is that before the possibility of any grants, because I know there is a grant program, and I know that's kind of hit or miss from year to year, but you all still actively put in for that whenever it
do.
comes up, right?
We do. That's the state security equipment grant. I believe we can be awarded up to 100,000 or 120,000. There is a match component. So we do submit for that annually. I did talk with the Planning Commission about that because the King George Elementary School part of that, I updated that night because we were able to use, I believe they were add-on funds from the GEAR grant that the state to address some of those things. So we continue to try to address some of those smaller needs that do qualify CIP-wise. We may use fund balance at the end of the year or go about ways to try to help alleviate, funding requests of the Board of Supervisors. If we can take care of it internally, we do those things, and we use our own staff to install and that kind of thing. So really, it's the King George High School camera system and the door access system was installed with the building itself. It was proprietary. It was with a company that no longer exists. So obviously, getting the parts and keeping it running is a trick. But really, it's more Sealston Elementary School and King George High School are the needs there. So you can pull off King George Elementary. And again, if we're able to do something for Sealston, much like we did King George Elementary, we'll continue to try to look for ways to make that happen.
Okay. And then you answered my other question about, so the softball field, it just wasn't included in the package
Correct.
when we redid the middle school because the softball field had to be relocated. And then I know baseball went down several months back. I think someone was actually there for an evening game and it wasn't particularly pretty. So, yeah, I do recognize that's a need too, and the Title IX issues that go along with not being able to support girls' sports as well. Or
it would make sense. We've got a brand new with the track. That lighting system was installed. Is Musco lighting? I mean, it would make sense to make all three of those compatible with what the track has. Because I believe they all come into that same caged area, that pole.
And the track was 2019, right? I think that was when the grand opening was for the track. Because I wasn't on the board yet. Yeah.
It seemed a little longer than that, but
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. And one last question. ADA accessible playgrounds for, I think you said for Potomac Elementary and Sealston Elementary.
Correct.
I hear that right? Okay.
That's correct. We installed, we had to replace the playground at King George Elementary mid-year. And so we pulled together funds and we made sure it was ADA accessible. So.
All right. Can you have, it might be that Dr. Bush is the best person to provide us this data. Could she send over some data to Mr. Miller about the populations at each of those schools that would require, that need that? So we can take a look, take their needs into consideration too.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question.
Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
At Potomac, which playground would that replace? Because I know there was one that was recently refurbished.
We've not specified exactly where it would go.
Okay, so it could be an add-on.
It could be. Just
Okay.
the idea that we would have one.
For ADA. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, that was, I was on the staff and we did a number of booster-thons there to help support that. I think that was 2016, 2017, that summer. So it'd probably replace the oldest one that's there that they've had to dismantle at times. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Benson.
Appreciate it.
Take care. You too.
Okay, now we'll go back to the original order, and we're gonna Chris, this thing won't go backwards. There it goes. And I'd like to invite the sheriff to join us at the podium.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to present this countywide radio system upgrade project for your consideration. But before I get into it, I'd like for you to take this time just to listen and hear something. Supervisor Stonehill and Madam Chair can understand the helpless feeling of silence when it comes to a radio. When you have requested for help and the radio system isn't working properly. The worst sound any first responder could ever hear when they need help is the deafening silence. The radio system is their lifeline. Without a proper operating radio system, they can't do their job safely. The current VHF public safety radio system is almost 20 years old with inadequate coverage, inadequate capability, and several crucial components of the system are beyond their end of life, which means it's no longer supported by the manufacturer and parts are no longer being produced. In January of 2021, we had to replace a power amplifier in one of the Owens Tower repeaters that services the Dalgren area at a cost of $2,310. This was a refurbished amp, as new ones are no longer available from the manufacturer. Most recently, one of the computers that run the radio system at the sheriff's office went down and is currently being evaluated at a cost of $4,417 just to see if it can be repaired. If it can't be repaired, all 4 computers in our 4 workstations will have to be replaced at an estimated cost of $10,000 each. We're requesting to upgrade the entire system to a 700 megahertz P25 trunked radio system. This system would not just be public safety radio system, but a countywide radio system, meaning any department in the county that has a need for two-way communications with any vehicle and personnel in the field. We propose this upgrade in 3 phases to minimize the fiscal impact to the county. The first phase would be the infrastructure and public safety. The second phase would be the other county departments and personnel. Third phase would be the schools and school transportation. Some of the advantages for an upgrading are multiple talk groups. We currently only have 4 channels to talk to dispatch. 1 sheriff, 1 fire and rescue, 2 shared tactical channels, which are used when field operations are ongoing and we don't want to congest the primary talk channels. Currently, the number 2 tactical channel isn't functioning at its full capacity, which is unknown to Motorola as to why. We could also have better coverage countywide and even in the building coverage with the 3 additional tower sites. We would have direct interoperability with surrounding counties who all operate on 700 megahertz systems except Westmoreland, who is on a UHF system. Through the radio and dispatch and tri-band radios will allow direct communications with them. We'd also have interoperability with other county departments. We'll have the capacity to add on other county departments and the schools in the future if the county desires with phase 2 and 3. Adding these departments will allow seamless operations during a natural or man-made disaster. We currently use the school buses for transportation of evacuees and do not have the direct communication, direct contact, and must devote a first responder with a radio to communicate with them, taking the first responder away from their primary duties. We also have the security feature. Our system has, as it stands right now, has no security. Anyone can look up our radio information on the internet and program it into an inexpensive radio and potentially disrupt our system and interfere with our calls. On the new system, radios will have to be authenticated before being allowed on the system, and should a radio get lost or stolen, the radio can remotely be disabled. The system would also have encryption to protect sensitive information going over the air, like patient reports to the hospital or deputies receiving information about a possible wanted subject that they are dealing with. Back in 2018, previous Sheriff Dempsey had requested this CIP and hoped the project would be approved and could be moved forward prior to the end of life of the radio equipment. With the equipment already past the end of life, you can see the critical need to move this project ahead in the timeline. We are asking for you to prioritize this project as critical. For consideration, Motorola offers leasing in the rears financing that we've used on a few other projects, such as the microwave replacement project 3 years ago. The microwave that we had replaced 3 years ago will be used with this new system, saving at a savings for the county. If approved, that would allow us to move forward with the upgrade in July 2022 and not have to make the first payment until July 2025. The preliminary budget price for the first phase of this project is $11,800,000. We are currently working on getting a firmer price for the entire project. Procurement has already approved to ride off the City of Suffolk contract for this project. A list of end-of-life equipment is available for your review if you'd like some, but I really do appreciate your consideration and I'll field any questions.
Thank you, Sheriff Giles. Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Sheriff Giles, thank you for coming out and thank you for the brief on this. Absolutely, it's a need. I do have a couple questions. So it's showing on the CIP that it's looking for obligation of dollars in 2022, 2023. Is that, I'm a little confused. Are you asking for us to, from the perspective of critical, meaning we start funding it this year?
Essentially, basically saying that go ahead and start the project, because with Motorola, they need to start doing some back work to get proper sightings and the equipment that we're gonna need for the new towers and whatnot.
Okay.
So they need to know that we're good to go so they can start getting that in place so we can move forward with the project.
Okay, thank you. So you brought up the existing system is over 20 years, it's past end of life. What is the lifespan of this system? The proposed lifespan of the system?
I don't have that answer for that, I don't know.
Okay, is there any way to get that kind of info?
I could get it.
Okay, if you don't mind, I would appreciate that.
Yep.
And then, so I see, so obviously the lion's share is up front. What's the, not that it's an insignificant amount, but comparatively it's a lot smaller. There's 600,000, 400,000 identified for the subsequent years. How does that, what is those portions for?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I could get back to you on that as well.
Okay.
So were those not tied to, because I wrote some notes while you were talking, you said the first phase was all public safety, the second phase would be other county
If they choose to.
departments if they choose to do so, and then the third phase would be the schools and transportation. Are those tied to those numbers?
Could very well be, yes, ma'am.
So if you could
So
find out for sure to
the-
answer that.
the 11.8 million, is that the full project for everyone to have everything done? Or is that only for the phase one? Phase one. Okay. What would phase two entail?
It did the radios and the subscribers for the other departments.
Okay,
Getting those actual radios that would go either in their vehicles or the portables,
tracking. Thank you.
as well as phase 3 would be the same thing for the school. And
Tracking.
then being able to put them into our communications stuff.
Okay. I think I'm good for now. Thank you, sir.
And if I could add real quick, when we talked about this, the sheriff was putting numbers in here as if we had to come up with the money up front. And then he did offer the alternate solution of the financing, like what we did with the microwave tower. So when he put this together, he was saying, this is how much it's gonna cost, and this is what I'm gonna need. But I do have an alternative solution.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Mr. Stonehill?
Thanks for coming out, Sheriff. Just for you guys, this is something that they certainly really need. It's been getting worse. It was never great. It's been getting worse and worse and worse for both sides of the house. Any grants out there to help with this?
We're researching them and nothing so far we found to be able to fit what we're looking to do. Motorola does offer a grant out there, but it's the back end of that, it just isn't feasible. They've talked about that, but it just doesn't seem like it would work out for us. We've also entertained the idea of a bond, but that'll take time to get that.
Is this something that, Fireside's gonna get on too, or? No, okay. That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bender?
I just want to make sure on a number. So if we did the leasing agreement, how much would that cost be in the first year?
Well, they offered three options, so it depends on what option we went with.
Okay. And the 11 million figure is 11.8 basically is if you bought it all up front, correct? And I remember I met with you, I think it was last year, it's such a long time ago, and I understand the urgency of it, and you explained it very well. I appreciate that.
So you explained the leasing in arrears financing. They could start implementing the project in July of 2022. The first payment would not be due until July of 2025.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so can we also, when our representative from Davenport comes to do the financial overview, if we can have you come back that night, please, Sheriff Giles, with hopefully some more answers to our questions, and then take a deep dive into this and what that looks like and what, if any, effect it could have on our bond rating and what the financing options are.
Okay.
I would appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we'll worry about that.
All right. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Thank you for your consideration.
Have a good night.
Next, we have Mike Muncy from General Properties. Oh, did I skip him?
You
Nope, I sure did.
Jeff.
Jeff Jenkins, sorry, Solid Waste. What? He's messing with me back there.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the rest of the board. I've come to you today to request a new roll-off truck. That's what the truck looks like that we're trying to replace. It's to haul the containers from both. We want to haul the containers from Perkins as well as Silston, and I'll go through why. Well, unless y'all really want to get into why. You go next, Chris. The Department of Solid Waste and Recycling current roll-off truck is 21 years old and has over 1 million miles on it. It cannot pass the Virginia State inspection and is not roadworthy. It's only used to dump trash containers at the Silston Convenience Center because it can access the landfill without going on a public road. The contractor is utilized to dump all containers from the Perkins Corner facility, as well as the recycling container from Silston. Due to the age of the truck, breakdowns are common. When it cannot be repaired quickly, a contractor must be used to dump the containers at the Silston facility because a backup truck is not available. Just to get in a little bit, we're planning on keeping the truck and using it as a backup at Silston, just in case so we don't have to use the contractor at Silston. Just keep the cost down. Just for example, the truck we have now, the last 2 weeks has been overheating every day. So we pull a couple containers, and we have to wait for it to cool off for the next 2. So it takes us all day right now. The department budgeted $60,000 for contracted container pickups this year, but is currently on pace to exceed that amount in Perkins. The department has experienced issues where the contractor did not dump containers when scheduled, which impacted operations. Other contractors were evaluated, but their rates are far higher than what is currently being paid. If the county owned a roadworthy truck, it would remove the need for a contractor except in emergencies, which would reduce the cost while improving efficiency. If the truck is not replaced, services will have to be increasingly provided by contractors, which increase cost and negatively impacts quality and efficiency. It would also cost approximately $30,000 more for a contractor to dump the containers at the Silston facility that are currently dumped with the county's vehicle. That would increase the total contractor dumping cost to nearly $100,000 per year. So I just, recommend action for the purchase of a new roll-off truck to ensure essential services provided in an efficient and cost-effective manner. So I guess I'll take any questions you have from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming out. I appreciate the information. I like numbers to make it easier for me at least to kind of process. So that helped me a lot to understand the ROI. So you said there's budgeted $60,000 for contractor currently this year, and it's already going to be over budget. It's anticipated it's going to be over budget. Do you have an estimated amount it's gonna be?
We're going towards 70 right now.
70 grand, okay. What do you, so let's pretend that the board goes and approves this. What would the budgeted contractor cost be? Because obviously you still want to have some emergency funds available in case there's a need for a contract. What would you anticipate you would budget for that?
Have the truck, I mean, if the new truck is under warranty, that would be a good thing. We don't have to pay any of that cost.
I'm not gonna hold you, I'm just got, an off the cuff estimate, 10,000?
Maybe 10, 15,000.
10, okay.
Because we get charged $140 for every pull from Perkins.
Okay. So, and it's 225,000, okay, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I understand exactly where you're coming from. Thank you.
I would keep in mind that some of this cost is related to changes that were made to the agreement that we have with Waste Management regarding the convenience centers that essentially now have us doing all of the work as opposed to previously. And so that is an impact, and that's some of that 60,000 is reflected in that. And I don't think you wouldn't have that, I think, if this agreement hadn't been amended.
Any other questions, Mr. Granger?
No, ma'am, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Stonehill?
I think your slides answered most of my questions, but you did say that you're still gonna keep this current truck as a backup?
Correct, because if it goes down, I mean, it still saves me from
Right.
having the contractor come in. And, I mean, just for example, I have a full metal container at Perkins right now. It's been sitting there for a week.
And this one truck will be able to hit all of them?
We'll have to hire 2 drivers because just to have a backup driver as well. But they're also going to work at the convenience center. They'll be doing both. But one driver will be able to handle both sites. They'll keep them pretty busy because with the way it is now, we are responsible for the tires, pulling the metal, freon, the refrigerant, putting all the refrigerant out, as well as the brush pile. I mean, there's a lot going on right now. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender?
So basically, due to the amended contract, this is necessary 100% to make sure the county doesn't have to spend a lot more.
this is trying to cut costs, yes.
Yes.
That's exactly what it is. We're put in a pretty bad bind from the county standpoint. I mean, it's going to cost you quite a bit of money.
Gotcha. And then how much do you think years a truck like this? Probably another 20 years, maybe even better.
Well, that's a lot. I mean, it's not because it's not going over distance. It's just going from Perkins, but when we haul metal, it goes to Fredericksburg, and that's it.
Okay.
That's part of the traveling. So they'll last a while.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. So you just said you're going to have to hire 2 people, right? A primary and a backup driver?
You need to because if he calls out sick or he takes vacation, I got to have another full-time driver. I mean, they're going to work at the convenience center as well.
Gotcha.
When they're not driving.
So are you down any staff?
I am not.
So those are going to be new positions that we would have to.
We actually have the 2 guys that both have CDLs already on staff.
And that was going to be my next question. Does anybody on your staff already have the CDL?
Yes.
Okay.
2 of the part-time workers at Silston has CDLs.
So would that be a conversion of those part-time to full-time?
That's what the plan is.
So then they could keep doing the part-time stuff that they're doing and do the other half of their job is part-time driver of the truck.
Right.
Okay.
Full-time, fully to the part-time.
All right. And then so are you only now asking for the truck? You're not asking for the cans now?
Trying to help you out.
I'm trying to help you out.
Well, the cans have doubled in price.
Yeah.
Since last year, when I came and got those 6 containers, it was
Right.
$42,000.
That was going to be my question because I know we did 6 last year because of COVID.
Right, that's $42,000.
Do you still is it because of COVID that you need them? Do you see what I'm getting at or not?
I guess you could call it COVID because waste is still shut down on the weekends.
So that's my next question.
And I'm paying rent on the 4 cans, the cans I get from local. he's now charging me a rental fee, so I'm paying that, which is
500 a month.
Right.
500 a month.
And I did talk to Mr. Miller about this. On Saturday, actually, when I got the call that the shredding thing was not being done.
I try to get ahead of you on that one. 'Cause
I know, I appreciate it. So, Mr. Miller, do you have any update for me? Have you been working with Mr. Jenkins about this, about my
Yes,
question?
so there's a couple things. One is, so we do have an understanding with Waste Management that they will open up on Saturdays. I think that's gonna be really effective, and Jeff is gonna work that out with their representative to get that, because COVID shut it down, and it's kind of been going on for a while now, and so we just revisited that topic today, and they're in agreement that they'll open up. The issue of the convenience centers, I think that's something that you have asked in the past about, what the situation is. Obviously, it's my understanding in 2018, I believe, September of 2018, the Board of Supervisors approved amendments to the existing agreement with Waste Management that essentially transferred all of the operations of the convenience centers over to us, to the county. And so that is where a lot of this is coming from. And that's why, I think they've been trying to do a Band-Aid approach. You had also asked, what our CARES Act money was. I think it was like a total of 40,000 that they bought for 6 containers. Is that right?
Down to 6 containers are 90 grand.
Yeah.
It's 15,000.
So I think that's one in reference to that. But my understanding of the agreement, the amendments to the agreement were that they were presented to the commission, excuse me, that's other states, to the supervisors. Y'all approved them. And then I think operationally things were maybe changed or something like that, or not necessarily changed, but they worked out the operations afterwards. Is that correct?
Presented. Okay, I'm gonna go through this. What was presented to the board and what we've been doing since we went to the board was did all the operations. And that's what we did. Anything was infrastructure wise, Waste took care of it. It was the way it always been. They pay for anything and everything. Took care of the tires, the metal, whatever. So we didn't have to worry about a roll-off truck. We just spent the 60 because they gave us money for operations. So that was part of pulling the containers and so forth. So that's what we've been doing since we started. I mean, the idea was that the county could probably make some money off of doing it that way. First year we actually lost a little bit. Second year we made a little bit. Then last year we were 35,000 to the good. So it was starting to work the way we expected it to do. Well, in the process, I guess we fired a employee, and she was very disgruntled, and she actually made a call to Dolly. Dolly comes in, starts doing a few inspections or whatever, and then Waste got involved because they're in charge of the infrastructure, as far as we know. Their lawyers get involved, and that's when they pulled the signed amendment from where it was signed by Dr. Young and the county attorney Gregory and David Howard. But after talking to Mr. Howard, he says he never read it because his lawyers gave it to him, so told him to sign it. It was done, so he signed it.
Okay, I think that's enough. So one last question, and why I bring this up is your board report, and why I specifically asked this of Mr. Miller. It said the landfill received 124, this was in the August report. Landfill received 124,595 net tons of trash for the month of July. The cumulative net waste receipts through July 2021 totals 742,223 tons received. The yearly contractual limitation is 1,600,000 tons. So we're almost at halfway through the yearly limit. Am I reading that right?
That's not my report, that's their report, but I'll tell you, they have the amendment on that too, where they can go to what, 1.5?
Sure. The point I'm trying to make is if we're close to coming up on the limit and they can always come back to us to go over, then how do we have an argument that they need to be closed because of COVID? I'm saying that publicly right now.
I'm not arguing with you on this.
I know you're not.
Right.
Yep,
I-
I'm just putting it out there.
Right.
Yeah,
And I know we're meeting tomorrow to get everything open back up for Sundays,
great,
locations.
because I have had citizens
Uh, My hands,
very, very upset about that.
my hands have been tied.
I understand.
But we're meeting, I guess me and Pete are meeting tomorrow to discuss that. He's on board to helping us amend it.
And
Uh,
Mr. Miller, please feel free to relay at least my concerns that I expressed here tonight. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Stonehill?
You brought up hauling metal to Summit, I take it,
Right now,
or wherever you're,
right, I think it might go to Thornburg.
okay.
Uh,
I just popped in my head, where do those funds come back to? You?
It comes back
That's you.
it goes back into our budget for the convenience centers.
Okay,
And I mean, we're doing it. We're actually hauling it away now, but we're not hauling it, so we're paying somebody to haul it. So we get what's left over, and we're still getting about what, $1,000 a week. So
but if you get a new truck that can haul it yourselves, then
everything will go
That
right back. To the
it goes right back to your budget.
Everything we get, even batteries, we haul batteries up to Fredericksburg and our employees and bring it back. They all goes back into our budget too. We put everything back into our budget that we can put back in there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Now it's Mr. Muncie's turn. Welcome, Mr. Muncie, General
Thank
Properties.
you for having me. This is my first time doing this, so, just kind of bear with me. I guess the first thing I want to look at is the lock upgrade. That's a big one. Right now, it says necessary. Chief Basham and I have been working on this, and it needs to be moved to urgent. These locks are outdated. I'm having a hard time getting the parts for them. They still are available, but they're very scarce. Right now, this lock system, when a new employee comes in, I have to go around manually programming every lock. So if they're at the library or if they're here at the Rivercombe building or, for y'all, it's very, I guess, labor intense. And then when that person leaves, I have to go deactivate every lock that badge had access to. The sheriff's office right now is the only system that we have that is where we want to go. It's a matter of minutes. When a new employee comes in or leaves, you go on the computer, you enter it in, and it's done. This lock system would also enable us, if we were ever to have a hostile threat or whatever, we could lock the building down within minutes. So I really do think this is an upgrade that's needed, and it needs to be done fairly soon. What I did with the courthouse, I had that done separately on the quote, because I know we're going to repurpose that building for something, but those locks are going to have to be upgraded at that time. To the drain tile, that's and the pavement for the courthouse needs to be done at the same time. With the moisture problem at the courthouse, what it is, the drains here on the back side of the building, the roof drains, are going out into the ground where it's a negative grade. So it's pretty much it ponds. And that came from, I guess, years ago when they resurfaced the parking lot. They didn't, at that time, I guess they didn't have the availability to mill it. So they just went over top. So what we're going to do, or proposing to do, is do roof drains and then take that drain across the parking lot back down to the back side where we can daylight it and get that moisture hopefully away from the building. That's the plan. And I've had a couple contractors look at it, and they're all in agreement with that. And then of course, the other is the repavement of the parking lot. I mean, to mill it, we're talking about a 2-weekend process. Mill it, repave it, the areas where the dumpster is and coming up towards the building where it's really alligating, really bad. We're gonna put 5 inches is what I've got the quote on to do of asphalt. And, like I said, I mean, one bad winter and that parking lot's gone. I mean, unless you want me to keep patching it. So, I mean, it's up to y'all. So, anyway, but that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Muncy. Questions? Mr. Granger? Mr. Stonehill?
Thank you, Mike, for coming out with your thorough presentation.
Well,
Drain tile, now that's just off the gutters, or is that like,
it's all it's a
it's
6-inch
not the
gutter. It's
drain?
gonna connect it to each gutter downspout. And then that will go into an 8-inch drain, which will, like I said, go across the parking lot, I guess back towards where that, the white shed is. It'll daylight right down there because it's, like I said, we've shot the grades and it'll work.
So that's just gutters, or is that the drain tile actually around the footer?
Oh, it's not drain, it's gonna be like gutter drains. Okay, so instead of it coming out onto the ground, actually, if you go and look, if you remember, we've got that pipe coming across. These are actually going to be tied in, taken underground, and then taken across, the parking lot to where they can be daylight. Because that's the only spot where on that courthouse where we have negative drainage, where it's coming back towards the building. There and on that one side where the the west entrance. So
I just want, I was confused. I was envisioning drain tile around the footer.
no. That would almost be, yeah.
I thought you were getting ready to put that
That's
down.
what, yeah, but it's actually gonna be gutter drains.
Gutter drains. Okay. I guess if you get the new locks, I'll actually be able to go through that door now.
Maybe.
I hope so. Thank you.
Hey, as long as they give you access.
That's true.
You only get 6.
Yeah.
Did you know you only get 6? Yes.
Yeah.
That could be part of the problem. So if you have doors you don't realize you have, and you have more important doors you want to get into, get with them. Because I found that out a few months ago. You only get 6.
Get with Amanda. Yeah.
Get with Amanda, yeah.
All I do is program them. I don't give the access. Amanda programs.
Yes.
Is that one door or 2 doors?
That's one door. Actually, that door stays open right there. But
Yeah, this one is. All done, Mr. Stonehill? Okay. Ms. Bender?
I'm gonna go a little more detailed because I've been talking about this since 2019. My only concern with the pavement in the drain tile is, and I was gonna bring this up in the CIP, is having someone to come to evaluate, which maybe you've already done, what is causing the issue with the mold in the building, in the courthouse building. And I say that because it makes sense to do that first before we pay for the pavement and the drain tile to make sure we're doing it right, because you don't want to pave it and then find out we need to do something else when we go to look at repurposing the building. So I would be amenable to do it all at the same time, to have somebody come evaluate and then do this.
Okay.
Because just for me, it makes sense instead of paving it and finding out we have more of a problem and then have to repave it.
I know Travis, he has weighed in on this, obviously, and worked with Mike on this. So, do you have anything you want to add on that about the courthouse?
I don't know, we've mentioned that before, but that's one of, I guess, would be my passions for 2 years, to make sure we do it right and that it's done, so we're not wasting taxpayer money and making sure we're doing it right. Thank you.
Yeah, so Mr. Cusenberry is speaking of under administration assessment of existing courthouse for 21-22 $75,000. So when we get to administration, I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So thank you very much for pulling this together and coming out. I personally, I do get where you're coming from, Ms. Bender, as far as wanting to do it in the right order and not be wasteful of taxpayer dollars. But this looks like Beirut out here. It is unacceptable. This is where our county administration is, the seat of our county government. This is where our citizens come to give us their tax dollars. This is where they come to vote.
I agree.
This is downright unacceptable.
I agree.
We need to fix this. I'm not a young chicken anymore, but I get around a lot better than some of the older folks who come here to get our county services. I left the Board of Supervisors meeting last week in the dark, and I fell in one of the cracks. So we need to take care of this.
I agree.
Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to any one of our 27,000 citizens. I'll end my rant now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully it's working.
Madam Chair and members of the board, good evening to you. So we have three projects we are requesting. The first is our ambulance replacement program. As you know, we have 7 ambulances that serve our citizens. Of those 7 ambulances, they cumulatively, we acquire a little over 200,000 miles per year, okay? Last year, we transported close to 2,000 patients. These ambulances are pretty much the backbone of our infrastructure for our emergency medical service system. As you know, in a fire rescue department, we don't have a separate rescue squad. We don't have a hospital-based EMS system. We are it. Our department responds to every medical emergency when someone calls 911. And that's whether you are a citizen or whether you're a visitor or whether you're traveling through. If it happens in King George County, we're responding to it. We primarily transport to 5 receiving facilities. The predominant and primary one is Mary Washington Hospital. The second is going to be Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center. We also transport to Charles Regional, which is the old Civista in La Plata, Maryland. We also transport on occasion to the freestanding ER in Lees Hill. We also transport on occasion to Stafford Hospital up near Stafford Courthouse area. So you can see we're pretty busy. In our revenue collections also, we in fact just had a meeting this afternoon, and our revenue collections also show that trending of our increasing of calls. When that fire truck passed by here just a little while ago, that was 3,081 was our incident number. We are on track for 2021 to reach close to 4,000 or over 4,000 incidences. This is the number for 2020. As you can see, over 3708 was a total. Just to, as a point to mention, if you remember last year, we skipped out on replacing an ambulance. So out of the fleet of 7, we currently have 4 that are already over 100,000 miles. One thing I think we could all certainly agree on is that when it comes to your emergency vehicles, you want to have them reliable. You want to have them in good working order. You don't want to have mechanical problems. No one wants to have a heart attack and break down because of mechanical problems. So we pride ourselves in keeping a very reliable fleet. We have are certainly good stewards of taxpayers' money, but it is certainly a year that we don't want to pass. I did speak to our vendor, our supplier, and there is so much demand and so much back order on raw materials. Our representative told me this week that if we placed the order that day, that the ambulance wouldn't be ready for delivery until September 15th of next year. Now that's typically we look at 245 days, but that is that's quite a way. So please take that in your consideration. As you know, when you adopt this CIP, the day that we get to go ahead, we're talking a year from there before we can actually use that unit. One thing about our emergency vehicles, you know, when one goes bad, we can't just pick up the phone and call you know, a rental company and say, hey, I need an ambulance that can do everything we need. And you know, nobody lets us use one. So these are pretty unique things to have, and they take a while to get them. As you can see, you have seen these numbers before in our budget work session, but for the point of just showing them again, these are all the EMS calls we ran in calendar year 2020, and you can see 260 motor vehicle crashes, 4 amputations, 8 vehicle entrapments, 27 cardiac arrests, and the list goes on. I'm not going to read all through those, but you can see that without our ambulances and without our fire trucks, you know, essentially we can't do our job. It takes not only the buildings, it takes the equipment, the apparatus, and it takes the people. All 3 of those components to get that mission accomplished for our citizenry. If there's no questions, I'll go ahead to the next project.
Any questions on the ambulance slide? Can I just ask a general question?
Yes, ma'am.
So I note that COVID isn't broken down anywhere there. Do you think that 352 difficulty breathing calls might have captured some of that you all ran?
It probably did.
I was just curious.
I'm sure it did. I will tell you this, that our difficulty breathing and chest pain calls, anything that, you know, a lot of cardiovascular related emergencies, we see big numbers in those every year. And these are how they originate. So, for example, it may come out as a difficulty breathing, but once we get on the scene, we may diagnose it and find out it's a true heart attack, or it's a much more serious issue. So it could, or it could be a simple asthmatic call or something of that nature, or COPD. But absolutely, you know, COVID has changed a little bit of everything, you know, particularly in healthcare and you know, in this line of business. So
Thank you.
yeah. All right, the next project is the fire rescue facilities, and I actually come before you with quite a bit of good news, and I'll start off with that and not leave you in suspense. I notified and contacted Mr. Miller at the end of last week. I received a phone call stating that the land that we were looking to acquire last year that we thought was essentially off the table and was no longer going to proceed forward is now back in negotiation. And so this body is going to be voting on October the 31st, which is a Sunday, Halloween Sunday, and by November 1st, they are going to let me know what their decision is. But I thought that was quite a relief to hear because that has been a challenge. Speaking on that, we have been, for more than a decade, we have looked at over 15 potential sites in the Dalgren area to replace our Company 2 station. All of you know where our Company 2 station is. All of you know the challenges that pose with being on Dalgren Road with you know, number one, where we have a backup station, we have very little room to turn around, we have congested traffic in the morning, we have congested traffic in the afternoon. It is only a miracle that we haven't had some type of major accident trying to get in and out, responding to emergency calls for that station. That facility was never designed to handle a 24/7 around-the-clock operation. We essentially made it into that. We took a closet in a storage room and made a bunk room, and we had to cut a window up from the upstairs to have a second means of egress. We have part of our equipment down the road at the old rescue squad building. The old rescue squad building was built back in 1954. But the needs back then are much different than the needs today. And we would like to get off of Dalgren Road, and we would and get into a more modern day facility to handle our current mission. The second part of that project is to add a fourth new fire and rescue district to service primarily our southeast portion of our county, and that would become a Shiloh station. This is quite a bit needed because if you look at this map right here in the yellow, and I know it's a little hard to see the colors in this slide, but Company 1 is right here where I have the pointer. And of the county county is roughly 185 square miles. Company 1's first due is the entire area of yellow, and that's 113 square miles of the 185. So in essence, this is Route 3, and we cover all the way from Route 3 to Stafford County line to Route 3 at the Westmoreland County line. And that is quite a hike. It takes us to come through the courthouse area, depending on the time of day, to get past the Route 3 and 301 intersection, and to get to service that area of the county is quite lengthy, especially if we have a high priority incident. We also cover this is Route 301. We also cover all the way to the Port Royal Bridge, and we cover about halfway up, probably right around the Masonic Lodge where that is on 301. That's the primary first due district. So we would like to turn it into this, and then everything in this orange would be the first due district of a Shiloh station. The good thing is that there had previously been, we have looked at the land that's right adjacent to the school bus garage that the county owns. We think that that's feasible. We think that that would certainly be conducive to serving that area. But this is something that we need to focus on in our planning processes as we move forward and as the county grows. So. And if there's no questions on that at this time, I'll go ahead and move to the.
Just one real quick. Appreciate the information on it, Chief. But the station or Company 4 would be, you're looking to address Dalgren district first.
Correct. Yes.
And then that would be okay. Just want to make sure I had it.
Yes, we put both of those in there back when there was some there was some questions about that in previous boards, but it is of my recommendation that we replace the current Company 2 station first before we look at it. Right now, we don't. Even if we had the station today in Company 4, we don't have the people to serve it. We don't have so we need to the last thing we need to do is to not take care of an existing facility, and so I would strongly recommend doing the Company 2 first. Yeah.
Good.
Just one question, jumping back to the ambulance. That 280 figure, that's just the chassis and the box, right? That's not gear or anything.
That's correct, and that's because it would be replacing one. So what we would have to do is we would take our power loading system out of the one we would be replacing, the stretcher, the heart monitor, all the Band-Aids, all the gauzes, all the, everything and then put it into the new one. But yes, that is, that price is the truck and the box.
And then if you do get, well, when you get the new Dalgren station, what about the other two old buildings? Any thoughts on those?
I have thoughts on them. We as the county do not own them. I've had previous conversations with our volunteer leadership about some potentials. Obviously, I don't think from an operational perspective, we would have any use of them. What they would do to them, with them would be of their own accord. I couldn't see the county paying for the building insurance, paying for utilities if they decided to keep them. I would suspect that they would probably sell Company 2. What I would like is, in the discussions I've had, is to turn that and give that over to the county, the Company 2 building, and then they will probably look at saving the old rescue squad station. And not to dig too much into details with that, but the old rescue squad station came with a little bit of a contingency back with the land transfer, because there's something in the deed that says if the rescue squad ever stopped, or the fire and rescue ever stopped utilizing that, it would have to go back to the people that gave it and donated it many years ago. So there's a little bit of a land contention with that everything hadn't been ironed out.
Thank you.
Ms. Bender?
You bring up a point. So is the buildings owned by the volunteers then, going back
Yes.
probably a very long time?
Yes, the building is owned by the Volunteer Incorporation, both buildings, Company
Right.
2 and Station 2, the
Okay.
rescue squad building.
And just for clarification for anybody watching, and correct me if I'm wrong, is part of the reason why we can't rebuild on that site besides traffic concerns is the wetlands behind it. It is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, great point. And I failed to mention that. We can't expand that 1 foot out. We can go up, but you can't expand out. In fact, I have been told that if we wanted to put that same building there today, it wouldn't be allowed.
And then
Setback requirements.
for those watching also, for Company 4, potential is land that the county already owns near the bus garage. And the fact that the architectural drawings have been paid for both of them a long time ago. So that is already something that's already done.
Absolutely. Great point.
Thank you.
The last project is a replacement of our engine 3. Our engine 3 is a 1998 Seagrave, and let me switch slides here for a minute. It's a 1998 Seagrave, and we, even though our CIP process looks at a 5-year planning process, when we look at apparatus, particularly large apparatus, our fire trucks, our tankers, our brush trucks, we look at these actually on a 30-year process, okay? Because when this county and we purchase a fire truck, that's a 20 to 25-year investment that we're making for that. Engine 3 is a 1998 Seagrave. We typically look at having a frontline service for 20 years and a 5-year reserve capacity. However, even though that's the national standard, we just don't have enough vehicles to meet that standard. So we typically try to push our front lines out to 25 years, sometimes even longer. Like, for example, our reserve engine 1, I envision us keeping that in the fleet longer than possibly even the 30-year mark, as long as the maintenance everything's holding up. But engine 3, because it's a pretty unique apparatus. It is our frontline apparatus currently at our Fairview Beach Company 3 station. It is our only vehicle in the fleet that actually has 4-wheel drum brakes. and it has braking problems. We've had notorious braking problems. Most vehicles, they may have rear drum, but they had front disc. This has four-wheel drum. And so it's very easy to be on Caledon Road with a large apparatus and glaze those brake shoes over and have brake problems. In my file right here, I have $17,000 of invoices and repairs on that truck. We had a critical failure at our training fire with this vehicle, the one that we did off of Belvedere, the big mansion training fire that you're aware of. We had a piece of, show a picture of it. This is the brass impeller, the impeller that makes the pressure inside the truck. Actually, there was a piece of brass that flew out and went into the in the fire hose, but the impeller came apart. And this is due to typically due to lots of cavitation where it's having small little beads of air pockets that eventually deteriorate the metal. This was a $10,000 repair. Now, even though that's a lot of money, the problem that really kept me up late at night about this is that if this happened on a fire and we had a few firefighters get killed, we were very blessed and fortunate this happened on a training incident. Okay. 2 weeks later, after this gets repaired, we have a leaf spring fail. That suspension part was about over $5,000. We've had to replace the water tank on it. So this has become a money pit. It is, and it's due to be replaced. And so what we would like to do is to put engine 1 and replace to company 3 and purchase a new engine 1 and then cycle engine 3 out of our fleet. We think that we can buy off a few more years on that. So this is what that's request. It would replace engine 3 out of the fleet. We take engine 1 that's here at company 1, we move down there. And we purchase a replacement here. Engine 1 is the workhorse in the county when it comes to fire suppression. It runs many calls every day throughout the county. Any questions? I know it's a lot of information covered.
Yes. So engine 3, you're just saying it's done.
It's done.
When the new one comes in, not a reserve, nothing, it's just done.
It's done.
Don't even sell it to, I mean, it's done.
Well, we would sell it.
Would we? Okay.
We fixed everything so
Okay.
far. We're just waiting for the next problem to pop up.
Okay.
But we would sell it, and we would take the proceeds and would come back to the county and offset the some of our purchase price.
Understood.
I don't think we would get a lot for it. I doubt we would get more than $15,000.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Oh my gosh, I totally blanked. Sorry, you can go on. I had another question. I forgot what it was off my head.
We can come back to you if you think of it, Mr. Granger. Go ahead, Mr. Stonehill.
How far out on engines are they for delivery?
A year.
Year.
Yeah, a year. So and there's a little bit of planning and design that a lot more engineering pieces that come when building a fire truck. But once you sign the agreement, issue a purchase order, you're looking at a year. All of them are backed up. They have computer chip issues. They're having raw material issues. They're having, in some places they're having labor issues to get certain parts. We found out last week our main power plant that runs these apparatus is a Detroit Diesel. Detroit Diesel is no longer going to be selling to anybody outside of the Daimler corporation. So Pierce Manufacturing that builds our fire trucks is not going to be able to get a Detroit Diesel motor after a certain date. And that they're like letting all their customers know that if you want to get a Detroit power plant, they're going to, they can put one on hold for you by a certain date. But these are the challenges that we're dealing with.
That was my other question. Pierce is who we're getting them from?
Pierce, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
That's all. Thank you.
And we've been happy with their product. It's a good product.
Ms. Bender?
I don't have everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out tonight, Chief. I just had one question. Do you have the ability to get on a rider with another locality to purchase ambulances, or is that not heard of?
Yes, we do. We typically, we typically will piggyback contracts. We look at the one that will best benefit the county. We like to stay with, and that's what we've done in the past. We like to stay with some, not have a bunch of mixes of manufacturers because it's a training gap that we can have with our personnel. So, but we typically do that, yes.
Okay. Mr. Granger?
I appreciate it. Mr. Stonehill asked one of the questions I had. The other one was, I see, last year, it was also identified for this current fiscal year's CIP request, but it's a $75,000 increase in the cost. Is that just because of material costs, or is?
On the engine?
Yes.
Yes, and that's, yes, these are, we have had challenges in the past where we have underestimated that number.
Okay.
And we have gotten points where we've had maybe some certain change orders that there wasn't think about this compartment configuration or was missing that. So I think this is a fair estimate, but yes, prices have gone. Every year they're jumping, 3%, sometimes even 5%. And,
okay. This is more than that. Is that because of the material scarcity?
What engine are you talking,
So from last year's, because I have that proposal, CIP proposal up, it showed $650,000 for the cost. So it's $725,000 this year. So it's $75,000 delta between last year's estimate and this year's estimate.
Sorry, I misunderstood your question. The difference is that we were looking at a very small platform to replace just engine 3 last year.
Okay.
This would be replacing engine 1, which would have some different capabilities.
Understood.
And the reason why we would do that is that it would allow us to preserve engine 1 for longer, and we wouldn't have to replace engine 1 sooner than the projected 2038.
Okay.
So we're trying to get to that, make sure so we would have to have, it'd be a different platform. So it would cost a little more money.
Understood. That makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I don't have any other questions. Thanks very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Dines, would you like to talk to us about information technology? Yes.
Good evening, members of the board. As you can see, my projects are on the screen. My first critical project is our network management and systems cybersecurity. You might notice that in the past, this line item was not $256,000. This will be an upgrade or renewal of some of the services. So it will contain our remote access to all of our users' computers so that we can get on them and take care of any issues they may have. It will include Windows updates from Microsoft for all computers and servers. It includes the cybersecurity that we're going to roll into this project. You might note from last year, we had a separate company that was doing that part of our cybersecurity, but we found that there were some issues because we had 2 different cybersecurity programs running. They said it was going to be seamless and wouldn't disrupt things, but it has disrupted some things, especially in our detective's office and the sheriff's department. So we decided to go with full Sophos. We had Sophos already for our desktops and our servers, and the silence that we got with the other company kind of bogged things down. So Now we've gone full Sophos, and they're taking care of all of the security measures that we need. Also, this includes the training that we're going to have for incidents for cybersecurity. We're going to start having tabletop exercises, and for our users, it will include the online training for our users so that they can sharpen their skills and guard against the many things that come through emails and files that people might send. The next critical item is our computer replacement. I'm sure you're familiar with the 5-year plan that we want to make sure all our computers are under warranty, and when they go out of warranty, you can't get the support or the parts that you need sometimes, so we want to make sure that we always have those items ready to be given to our staff. Now, of course, we really can't get anything now. We still haven't gotten some things that we need that we ordered along months and months ago because of COVID. So hopefully, if things turn around a little bit, we will be able to put this into practice for this coming year. The one critical thing that we have for our compliance with the HB 2178, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that has to deal with election integrity. And so we work closely with Lori Gump, our registrar, who does a great job for us in making sure our elections are up to code. And so with that, we have rolled into some parts that we can start to use for our county. And eventually the state is going to start auditing these elections and your procedures and your guidelines and your fail-safe type activities. So what this was about a 1,100 item check sheet that you had to fill out and explain how you're doing your cybersecurity, and especially with the elections. And so Lori's department had a part, and she has all of her things in order, and you have to have backup places where people could vote if something happened, if something was compromised. The sheriff's office was involved with that as well, because they have to protect the people that are working the polls and that are voting. So it's a big project that's coming up, and that will be $60,000. And we plan to keep that. That is actually with the old company that we use for all of our cybersecurity. They had already started helping us chart a path to make sure we could take care of those things. And so we're going to keep them just for that one little piece. The other things I deemed as necessary, the Cisco Meraki equipment is for items that might come up that people need as far as wireless access points, cameras, security cameras. A lot of our buildings are not equipped with that, and some things go on that aren't captured, that some people had asked if we could put that into our budget. So I put that in as far as that goes. We have our countywide via VoIP phone system that we put in for the administration building, Parks and Rec, Fire and Rescue, and the Service Authority. We will be doing the Sheriff's Office starting in October the 4th, that week coming up. And we still have the Courthouse left to do as well. So that originally I was trying to avail people of equipment so they could finish outfitting their office. And we've had a growing number of people that have been hired. That's another thing with a lot of these items. The contracts were started with about 175 people working in the county with computers directly. And we have grown immensely and have needed more and more equipment to keep up with the staff. So that's why some of these items have gone up so much, because we're growing as a work staff, and we need it because a lot of people were doing a lot of work and they didn't have the staff numbers that they needed. So thanks to you all, we've been able to add to our staff and help serve our public much better. The fiber project is critical too, but I didn't push that one as much because it's not going to be $358,000. We're hoping, thanks to Chairman Kupka, who wrote our senator about trying to be able to use the fiber that maybe the E-rate. So we're hoping that we can use the extra fibers laying in the ground that the schools have, going down Route 3 here and then going down towards the beach and Dalgren especially, because that was the biggest construction cost, I guess because of that windy 205. So with that, I think our original that we asked for the first time when we thought we were going to be able to use that fiber was about $135,000, $140,000. But since we couldn't use it, we were going to have to go all the way to the middle school and go all the way down. And that's really windy roads, and it would take a lot of money for the construction costs for that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that at some point, because we like to have our fire rescue stations all that are in that area, that are all connected, so that they can have their backup system at each station in case something happens to company 1 or 2 or 3. And of course, with the new company, that would be good if they can finally get that, then we'll know exactly what it is. We were kind of hesitant to say, okay, let's put it there, and then they might leave there. So now that there's a path, we'll be able to make sure that they're connected. Basham, especially, Chief Basham especially wants that because he wants his data replicated. So he's very high on that. And of course, in the future years, we'll have to have our maintenance agreements with our Meraki equipment, which is what we've gone with all of our infrastructure. We finally have all those in place. And so we usually get the 3 to 5 year maintenance agreements. So that's why that is so high, because a lot of our equipment is in Cisco Meraki. And I guess that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? You want to lead off, Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Dines, thank you. So network management systems, that's a service, a yearly service. Is that what my understanding is?
Yes, we have a third party that provides us with the software to do that.
Okay.
And it also is tier 3 and tier 4 level support. Because we only have 4 of us. And so they help us out sometimes with big projects and things like that.
Understood. The Virtual Information Security Office cybersecurity, which you talked about, was working with Ms. Gump, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
She's big into that for the election. Yeah.
Understood. As part of I think it was the network management system, you said that there was a cybersecurity portion that was involved, or I'm sorry, I got a little lost in the weeds. So you said there was some challenges with the cybersecurity that was rolled out because it interfered with the sheriff's department. Is that my understanding?
That was the main office that had issues.
Okay. So, but you said you're going to continue to use that one that was causing problems for the sheriff with the registrar's office. Is that my understanding?
No. What we're going to do is the same third party that is helping us with the management with the tier 3 and tier 4 level within projects, they have turned on their Sophos that will do the same thing that the Assura people were doing.
Okay.
The only thing we're keeping with them is the guidelines, policies, and tabletop exercises that they want to do to help us and also to train us so that we can handle those things in the beginning when they happen if we were to have a cybersecurity issue.
Okay. That makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
And then the countywide fiber project phase 2. So you talked about you're hoping it's not going to be $358,000. When would we know that?
Well, I would have to have a definite that
We want to move forward with that
but the
project.
schools would allow us to use that fiber like we're expecting the whole country is going to be able to use that for the purposes that we need.
Okay.
But also I have to have the company come back out and probably do another survey, and then they would be able to give a final number on that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill, any questions?
You're welcome. Thanks.
Ms. Bender?
No questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, yay for E-rate.
Yes, yes.
Pestering people actually does work for us once in a while.
It does.
So, yeah, I note in the ARPA, and I'm assuming you'll work with Mr. Miller and Ms. Hahn, because we can use some ARPA money, and so we have some now, and I know we have a good chunk, 650,000 or so set aside for our broadband project, but in addition to the wastewater uses, eligible uses are also broadband expansion, and it does talk about deliver service that, so would this be at least 25.3? It's anywhere from 25.3 to 110.
Oh, yes.
And it would, because it would be using that E-rate. And it says Treasury interprets businesses in this context broadly to include non-residential users of broadband, including private businesses and institutions that serve the public, such as schools, libraries, healthcare facilities, and public safety organizations. So that would be able to tie in the firehouse and the sheriff's office and all that. So
Yes,
I note, and it's good you have your projects spread out over a number of years, because we have this first tranche, but we're going to get another tranche right in, yeah. So we don't have to do everything all at once, but if there are small bites of these things here that would qualify, like a fiber project, or it also deals in cybersecurity. There is a certain level, but, and I'm sure Ms. Hahn can tell us, but it has to replace up to lost revenue, but it would cover some cybersecurity projects as well in the ARPA money too. So as long as we're making sure to add that to the list so we can leverage all the different, besides just the CIP, if we can use whatever we can towards some of these needs too, I think that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks very much for coming out.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't have any questions.
All right.
Thank you.
And now Chris Clark is going to talk about Parks and Recreation.
Chris, you gonna put the presentation up for me then? Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Parks and Recreation proposed capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. I'd like to start with a little bit about the CIP development process for Parks and Recreation. Kind of step one and step two of Ms. Hahn's plan is about 6 steps for us. Staff regularly reviews parks and facilities to identify projects and improvements. This year, staff presented 13 proposed projects to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee on April 14th. The PRAC authorized a public survey, which was conducted online in late April. The survey results were tallied and reviewed by the committee in May. Following that meeting, staff updated the rankings of the proposed projects. At their June meeting, the committee approved the staff recommendations of the 10 projects that are included in the proposed CIP. One of the key tools for project development is our 2017 needs analysis. Projects are developed in response to this needs analysis, public feedback, and staff observations. The 2017 needs analysis highlighted a number of recommendations that relate to the proposed and previously adopted CIP items, including ADA compliance, repair and maintenance of existing equipment, renovation to the Citizen Center, acquisition of additional park facilities, and development of water access points. The highest priority items from the needs analysis that can be addressed in this year's plan include walking and biking trails, playgrounds, an indoor facility, kayak access, an indoor walking track, and an off-leash dog park. The April public survey conducted by the department received 109 responses. Some brief highlights: all 4 election districts were represented. Nearly 75% of respondent families are made up of 4 or more people. 44% are Parks and Recreation participants. 34% were Little League participants. 24% were travel soccer participants. 60% of the families that responded have elementary school age students, and 29% middle school age students. Here are our projects in ranked order. The reconstruction of the tennis center continues to top the needs of the department. Approved in FY20, this project has been on hold due to the pandemic. Unfortunately, due to continued deferment, the project has increased in cost to $400,000 as prices for materials and labor have increased. This project is urgent as safety concerns may affect the ability to keep the facility open to the schools and the public. 24% of our survey respondents said this project was important or very important. 2 named it their #1 item. The Planning Commission rated this project as a 2. They ranked from 1 to 10. The lower the number, the more important the project. Tonight, you've already heard from Dr. Benson about sports field lighting, but I'll talk about it some more. As our number of users increase, so does the demand for more playable hours. At Sealston Sports Complex, we seek to add lights in FY22 to 2 soccer fields, allowing for increased playing time, both for Parks and Recreation soccer and for travel soccer programs. This is our most pressing need in the fall. Our most pressing need in the fall season as sunset moves earlier. In FY24, we seek to add lights to the remaining 2 softball and baseball fields. These items are $350,000 and $600,000 respectively. 60% of our respondents named this as important or very important. 18 named it their #1 item. The Planning Commission rated this as a 3. Other upgrades to the Sealston Sports Complex include in FY22 adding a playground for $100,000. Sealston Sports Complex is the only park in the county without a playground, and we frequently get requests for one as young children have nothing to do when they attend events other than watch their games or practices, which if you have a 4-year-old is a very big challenge. For FY23, we propose adding sand volleyball courts. The county does not have any sand volleyball courts at this time. This is proposed at $25,000. 59% ranked this as important or very important. 15, their #1 item, and the Planning Commission ranked this as a 5. Headed to the opposite end of the county, the acquisition of 166 acres contiguous to Barnesfield Park and the changes to Wayside Park due to the construction of the new Harry Nice Thomas Mack Middleton Bridge necessitate a complete master planning and development process for all 3 properties. Over the fiscal years 24, 25, and 26, we propose creating a complete master plan for the nearly 330 acres, as well as the development of new amenities as recommended by that planning process. A draft master plan by the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee is the image included in the slide. 56% of our respondents named this as important or very important. 16, their #1 item, and the Planning Commission rated this as a 5. Staying at Barnesfield, but separate from this master planning process, is the need to upgrade the current and add additional lighting to the softball fields. For FY23, we propose replacing obsolete lighting on Field A with lighting that meets current safety standards set forth by national governing bodies such as the Little League International. In the spring, current lights failed and were offline for a month while we awaited repairs, which cost $2,500. Due to the age of the lighting, there is worry that additional repairs may become necessary. In FY24, we propose adding lights to fields B and C. In doing so, we would increase the marketability of Barnesfield Park as a sports tourism destination for baseball and softball, as well as increasing available hours for local programming. 50% said this was important or very important. 11 named it their #1 item. The Planning Commission rated it as a 4. In FY22, we again seek funding for specific park safety upgrades that fall outside of the normal operating budget. The proposed $125,000 would replace the bleachers at Barnesfield Park that do not meet current code, modified fencing heights at Sealston Sports Complex and Barnesfield Little League Field to provide proper protection for spectators in the bleachers, add fencing to Barnesfield Fields A, B, and C to enclose those fields, increasing safety and security, and finally add dugout roofs at the same parks. 52% say this is important or very important. 1 named it their #1 item. The Planning Commission rated this as a 2. Currently, King George Parks and Recreation holds an MOU with the school board to utilize school facilities during non-school hours. This limits our athletic programming for all ages to evenings and weekends due to the limited availability of facility space. In 2020, the Infrastructure Advisory Committee recommended the reuse of various buildings in the county, including the old middle school. Clearly, Dr. Benson also has eyes on that, what the school board does. Renovation of that site in FY26 for $7.5 million with $250,000 in planning work the year prior would allow gymnastics, the shooting clubs, wrestling, and karate all to find a home in a modern space, as well as increase the available space for recreation programs. This item is important and very important to 45% of our respondents, and the number one item to 7. The Planning Commission rated this as a 6. The 2017 needs analysis noted an off-leash dog park as a high priority. Currently, citizens run their dogs off-leash at various parks, which leads to fear amongst other park visitors, dog waste being left on sports fields, and complaints to both Parks and Recreation and the Sheriff's Office. Creation of a safe, responsible location near the center of the county will be a benefit to both dog owners and non-owners alike. This is an FY23 recommendation for $75,000. 42% named this very important or important. 12 named it their number one item. The Planning Commission, though, saw it as a 7. Playgrounds have a safe, useful life of 15 to 20 years. The playground at Barnesfield Park was installed in the early 2000s and is proposed for replacement in FY25. In 2019, a slide and swing were replaced, and we currently have a new arch bridge on order to replace one that is showing high wear. Both of these repairs were $5,500 respectively. Updating the playground to a new, safe, ADA-compliant structure for $100,000 will add to the enjoyment for children both in free play and while attending events at the park. 38% named this important or very important. 8 made it their number one item. The Planning Commission rated this as a 6. The final project tonight is the sitting empty at Sidell Brooks Junior Park is the old animal shelter. Master naturalists, master gardeners, the co-op extension office, and Parks and Recreation are looking to redevelop this facility into an outdoor education center. The request is to use CIP funding as matching funds to supplement grants and awards starting in FY24. 38% named this important or very important. 6 made it their number one item. The Planning Commission rated this project as a 7. In closing, I wanted to show that Parks and Recreation facility improvements are ongoing. Here are some recent and current projects funded by the CIP, CARES Act, Recreation Activity Fund, and tourism funds. In 2020, a renovation was done to the baseball field at Sidell Brooks Junior Park, and ADA door openers were installed at the Citizen Center. The restrooms at the Citizen Center were renovated in 2018, and were also made ADA compliant at that time. Plans have been developed for the picnic shelter at Sidell Brooks Junior Park, but bids prior to the pandemic were higher than budgeted. The shelter will be rebid when construction prices look more favorable. Turf enhancements are ongoing at Sealston Sports Complex and Sidell Brooks Junior Park. Not making this year's CIP recommendations for the department were the repaving of 2 parking lots, Sidell Brooks Junior Park and the Citizen Center, as well as the redevelopment of the recently acquired home on Roseland Road into a public structure. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Granger, would you like to start us off, sir?
Mr. Clark, thank you for the brief. I appreciate it. I appreciate the numbers. I don't have any questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill.
The king of slides has done it again. I think you got just about everything up there. I can't think of anything offhand, but thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender?
I have several questions. Sidell Brooks Park, the picnic shelter. I went with my daughter numerous times there and spoke to, I'm going to use the word numerous again, or many citizens, especially elderly, that were bringing during COVID their grandchildren there to use the facility. And they expressed disappointment. There was no way they could get out of the sun and they had to sit in their cars. So I know it's very important, especially in COVID times, that, you know, a lot of people use the park. A lot of older people might bring their grandchildren, and not having a place that they can get out of the sun is something we need to look at. Another question I have, if you renovated the old dog pound, would that have public bathrooms? Because that is another complaint about Sidell Brooks Park, that there is no bathrooms. Not everybody likes to use a porta potty.
So the plans are with me. I brought them tonight for the shelter. Wiley Wilson helped us develop that. We submitted that we put that out to bid, with an anticipated budget of about $50,000. The project, the one bid we was returned at almost $140,000. After I had a heart attack, we decided we would rebid that later. Unfortunately now with COVID and the price of building materials, it's definitely not the time to rebid that. There are other options to look at, where we could use fabric shelters. Lots of folks use that when they do shading over a playground, but we could build a hip structure like that. Would be something to look at going forward. That project is one that I identified to Ms. Hahn as a possibility of ARPA funds, and looking at whether or not we could use there are current funds sitting in a CIP account that was used for park development at Brooks Park, and see if we could use that with any additional funding to possibly get that shelter done sooner. The other is a bathroom facility. The initial design we had done by an architect for free. We had a volunteer seek that person out. Does not include external bathrooms on the outdoor education center. They would be internal. Water and wastewater infrastructure is part of the ARPA. I would be willing to go and see if I could argue that building a bathrooms facility in a park might be water and wastewater infrastructure. I don't know if that would meet the needs, but possibly, if that would be possible, that would be, obviously building a bathroom in that facility is a definite need.
I mean, I've seen some of those sunshades, even in a big park, and they are very nice. And it would also, the county invested in those picnic tables that have taken some abuse being out in the sun all the time. That would also help take care of those picnic tables so they lasted longer. And then the last thing about the dog park, I know a lot of people have mentioned, I was on the committee who did that survey in 2017 for the Parks and Rec. And I actually observed, I was at Barnesfield this summer, and there was an incident between someone who didn't live in King George that brought their dogs and the resident of King George. And I actually could see how it might be quite important to have a section just to have dogs, because it created an incident where the person was very afraid they had a little child. And so a place that, we're going to get a lot of traffic over that bridge, a place that people, if they stop, they could let their dogs go in a safe area and other people wouldn't have interactions, is what I'm putting at. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. So, it may be that the water line could be run there, and that would be an allowable use. And then, I'm sure you know this, another section of ARPA, investments in improving outdoor spaces, e.g. parks, be an eligible use of funds as a response to the public health emergency. Certain types of services that are eligible uses when provided in a qualified census tract. So it would at a certain time, Shiloh District, much of it was in a qualified census tract. So we need to check, because I just redid the census, so I'm sure things may have changed, maybe not in our favor, but I hope not. But at one point in time, a good portion of the Shiloh District was in a qualified census tract. Yeah, for example, investments in parks, public plazas, and other public outdoor recreation spaces may be responsive to the needs of disproportionately impacted communities by promoting healthier living environments and outdoor recreation and socialization to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So if we can have that added to the possibility of ARPA one way or another, and yeah, dog parks, because I almost turned on my mic and said, and supervisors, when you mentioned all of the complaints that your staff and the sheriff's office receive at soccer games and so forth, with people not understanding the rules and thinking they can police the park, and then we have disputes that I have to go break up because we can't have that. So I appreciate that. I'm not sure that that's in a super immediate need based on everything else that you have here. There's a lot of open space elsewhere that's privately owned in the county, but yeah, I appreciate you putting yourself out there by bringing up the water line. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So I guess the next piece is administration, and it's kind of going to be tag teamed if necessary. If Travis wants to, Travis. Because Travis was with us when we started the process here. I can start it off with the Ralph Bunch School. We have the $500,000 grant that we just accepted at our last board meeting. We got that approved, and that's for the roof at the Ralph Bunch. We weren't looking at putting any dollar amount on anything else in the CIP, but we wanted to bring it up in the CIP because we were anticipating that grant, and then we put out the bid for requests for proposals for how we can repurpose it. And I don't know if you want to.
So can I ask a question related to that particular issue? My understanding of the grant, and I could be wrong, seems like a long time ago that we put in for that, like a year and a half, I think, but it's for reimbursement, right? So I feel like it was for reimbursement, but I could be wrong. So we would have to, my thinking is we would have to put it in the CIP, but if someone can double check that, we would have to put it in the CIP. Yeah, to do it, and then once it's done, and I think we have 3 years to do it, right? Then once it's done, we prove that we spent the money how we said we were going to spend it and submit the receipts, and then they pay us back. It's kind of like the SRO grant that the sheriff's office has. You have to go ahead and obligate it and do it, and then you do your quarterly or whatever grant reports and get paid back for it. So I think we have to put it in, just so everybody, all my colleagues are tracking that.
So for the 500,000.
500,000, yeah.
And in terms of the usage, that's going to be a separate discussion, but we wanted to, have the roof grant, put in here, and I think that's the best way to handle it. The other items on there.
Can I just double check with my colleagues, because I just kind of jumped in there directly, but anyone else have a question about that item before we move on?
I did. I wanted to add one thing because I was going to bring this up anyway. I would like to see, I know it's coming up about the courthouse, having somebody evaluate the building, but I was going to bring up Ralph Bunch of having somebody come and evaluate that building and the old middle school so they can tell us what the conditions, the issue, how much it would cost to do something. And it would seem prudent if we had somebody come and do one, we do more than one. So we know exactly, because I'm big on let's decide what we're doing with these buildings. So having somebody come and evaluate the properties and tell us what's wrong with them, how much it would cost. I've mentioned this to Travis before.
I believe in 2012, was it 2012 that Wiley Wilson did a review of Ralph Bunch?
There are at least 2 studies out there of Ralph Bunch. They have that up in administration. They can get that to you if you want to take a look at it.
Right, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about today's dollars and costs. It's not 2012, it's not 2017, so the conditions have deteriorated. So what would need to be done to do anything with those buildings? Is it even worth, at least, I know Ralph Bunch is different, but like for the old middle school, I'm just bringing that up.
Okay, so let me clarify. If first of all, I don't know, this was never presented to the Planning Commission, so I don't know if it can be a new project or if it would have to be handled in another year. Is that?
The building evaluation.
It could be put in here if they wanted to do it? Okay. Okay, well, I just wanted to make sure. Well, what I'm saying is that that's how it's been explained to me with the Planning Commission process here in the state of Virginia. Yes, I realize that the supervisors can do whatever you want in terms of projects, but it was explained to me that if it's not initially in something, you can't just add things.
It just wouldn't have to, we could do it separate from the CIP process too, if we wanted to.
Right.
And yeah, because it's in the same district. Yeah.
I would agree with that.
And
I just think it would be prudent.
Yeah.
Okay. if there's any, do you have some other questions? I'm sorry, I keep.
No, that was just on Ralph Bunch.
Okay, so the other ones that are up there, the Trailways study implementation, it's my understanding, this is just something that was identified in 2018 and is kind of put in there if you have funding for it. So it's, and it may be, it's kind of it's been replaced by whatever is done with the GWRC study.
Smart scale, yeah.
And smart scale, so it may be able to be just taken off at this point. Not to say that there isn't an interest or a desire. I think Chris can allude to that, for trails, and but it is linked to a bigger picture issue with the GWRC study, the Greenway study, and other things. The middle school turn lane, so that is in there because we just added that, obviously revenue sharing with VDOT, and so it needs to be reflected in our CIP. I believe that's another one that is we spend it and then we get reimbursed 50%, is it? Yes. Okay. And then the assessment of existing courthouse. So the 75,000, and certainly would ask, Travis if he wants to add anything, but this is the assessment of what to do with it, what the present issues are with it. Mainly, I think looking at the moisture that's getting in there and what kind of things are going to be necessary to for the building to continue to be used in some capacity once the new courthouse is built. So I think that's what the 75 does. Is there anything else, Travis? Is there any questions on that?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Ms. Bender.
that's what I was talking about. So adding the assessment, extra Ralph Bunch and the old middle school. So whoever we hired come in to do all three. That's what I was talking about. I was also going to add in the current school board office, but that might be because, if we relocate them to a different facility, then that would be an open.
You've not done anything really, this is just an estimate on this 75. So there's been no effort to reach out to anybody. So we could probably we could create an estimate to enhance this if we're going to add these other buildings in. Okay. Will you? Yeah. Okay. So we will get that. Do you think that's something that we could have for the next time they meet, or is that something? Okay. So we would have some information at the next time we get together. Okay.
Thank you.
The fueling depot is, Chief Moody is going to talk about that, and I think that he'll be able to tell you about the criticality of it.
Mr. Miller, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on this, and members of the board. So I've been probably the most outspoken about this situation and this issue. I think we all remember, as Chris is pulling up the slide, we all remember what happened about on May 10th of this past year. We all became aware that our fuel supply system in the entire East Coast was cyber attacked by a foreign nation, and it caused a major interruption in our fuel supply. And on May 11th, our governor declared a state of emergency. And when he declared a state of emergency, it was supposed to be no panic. And we started seeing panic fuel buying. Some of the pictures I'm going to show you are not of King George County, but they're pictures that you've probably seen on the internet. But one thing that I will tell you is that we had that same situation that was occurring here in King George County. I, as your fire marshal, got reports of people pulling trailers, filling up agricultural containers full of gasoline, of gasoline, people showing up with, 10 5-gallon containers of gasoline, putting it into a car. Sometimes there's multiple people in the car. It's extremely hazardous. I think one of the things that many people in our populace underestimate the dangers of gasoline. Here's our problem that we have. We currently, how we fuel up all of our emergency vehicles, and I speak on behalf of our department, and I'm also speaking on behalf of our sheriff's deputies' cars. And Supervisor Stonehill, you know this better than anyone.
And the school buses.
And the school
And
buses.
the service
and the
authority
service
vehicles.
authority, correct.
Thank you.
And all the other vehicles. So our building inspectors, all the vehicles, our animal control, we utilize our local vendors. And 95% of the time, it's not a problem. It is a problem when we have what happened in May of this past year. It is a problem what happened in 2012 when we had a diesel fuel crisis and shortage. When we, back in 2012, if you look at the narrative in here, the master plan was in 2012. Well, it just happened to be what prompted that was because we had a diesel fuel crisis in 2012. And so we would come up to pumps back in May of this year, and we would get in line with the long lines to fill up our emergency vehicles. On May 12th, we called around to every local vendor that we had that sold gas. Not one of them would provide us an arrangement to reserve fuel for and not just regular government vehicles. They would not reserve fuel for emergency vehicles. I'm not telling you anything that's a secret. Most of our fueling depot places are run by major corporations. There's contracts, there's agreements. The local managers don't have the authority any longer to say, hey, we're going to reserve 20% of our supply for emergency operations. So it's it really posed to be a problem. And it was a problem for about a week. I literally had people calling. They get to one place and they don't have no gas, and they'd say, well, there's gas over here. So you would chase places going to gas. Now, our department, we run primarily on diesel, a lot of our vehicles. So we didn't feel a major crunch on this, but our vehicles that run on gasoline, we did. This is just some of the pictures you saw, no fuel signs, bags on pumps, long lines at the pumps. We had that here in King George. I can assure you of that. You saw pictures of this, of people stacking fuel, people putting gasoline in non-appropriate containers. I know we personally had that because I witnessed it and had to intervene on it. But you had this was happening. This was happening everywhere on the East Coast. And what we would have to do is we didn't have any priority of getting fuel. So your deputy would have to get in the 10 cars behind, and if the person in front wanted to hoard fuel, the managers were fine with it. We confronted them on it. They said there's nothing we can do. If they pay for the fuel, they can take as much as they can take. I think that's a very vulnerable system. I think that we need to have a way to potentially having a fuel depot. And in 2012, we had came up with a preliminary concept of looking at putting one back here at the school bus garage. Now, since then, myself and Mr. Miller have had further conversation. I've been working with Travis Kusenberry on it. And we're looking at maybe coming out with something a smaller scale and possibly putting it at Company 1. But something where we can just have a diesel tank and we can have a gasoline tank And we have a way that we can have our own fuel under these periods of yeah, of shortages, when there's supply and demand issue. I think the cost would certainly come down. We were estimating around $200,000. In 2012, Wiley Wilson estimated approximately around 80-some thousand dollars for this one here, but that was 2012 prices. What we believe, and it's a very rough number, but we're looking at that we could possibly bring it down to like $125,000 if we put this at company one. But we have to have a way of securing having our own fuel supply. Years ago, we had one at the old bus garage. There was a diesel tank. That's no longer. So they're utilizing Sheetz and Fastmart and Wawa's and to get their fuel. So we don't have that opportunity anymore. We have had times back in 2012. We contacted the state of Virginia Department of Emergency Management, and they said, "Hey, we could probably get you fuel. Do you have a way to store it?" And the answer is no. So we can take a priority of getting fuel even in a fuel crisis, but they're not bringing the tank and the pump and the whole setup. You would have to have a way to store it, and this would solve that problem. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for, I've been the most outspoken about this, and thanks, Mr. Miller, for giving me the opportunity to speak on it.
Thanks, Chief. Mr. Granger?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Chief, again, thank you. So you kind of answered, I think, my question there at the end with bringing up, I was wondering who would be providing the fuel that would go into the tanks, because having the infrastructure in place to store the fuel is great. Would you go through any other means as well to keep it stocked, or would it really only be used in the times of emergency and you would continue to use local vendors in regular operating conditions?
What my plan would be is probably you would use this on a more primary basis and use our local vendors on a secondary basis. So now when when the units are coming back from the hospitals, they would probably still fuel up, on the way if they needed fuel. We would set up a service contract with a fuel supplier that would fill this and then refill it as needed. And then in periods of like a crisis, when the fuel supplier said, "Hey, we can't, we're just short just as much as everybody else," that's when we could get with the state and then take a priority, and the state could issue, deliver it for an emergency means in that case.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Granger. Mr. Stonehill?
I like that we're supporting our local businesses and using our local vendors, but I do like this idea. I think it would save quite a bit of money, and I think it would save for emergency situations like that. And I don't know if the state can get any better pricing on fuel. Obviously diesel is only going to last so long. Gas is only going to last so long, so that has to be used before it turns. Is that going to be, are you thinking it's going to be for the whole county, just fire, just emergency services?
Our initial thought in conversation with Mr. Miller is that it would be predominantly just our department on a day-to-day basis. It would certainly, we could set it up, for sheriff's office. I think there could be some cost savings there, and that's why I think it would be our primary use. The biggest critical need is when we have these fuel shortages, and sometimes it's even winter storms or hurricanes. Where people are going out and they're hitting the grocery stores and they're hitting, filling up all the cars and their generators. But I think we could set it up where, certainly, at very minimum, the sheriff's office. And if we got into an issue where it was a more larger issue, then certainly the service authority, if we needed school buses for shelters and there were or to, you know, take people to shelters, we could open it up for that in that case.
I mean, like the troopers and all the state vehicles, obviously they fuel up at VDOT, you know, at the shop there, and, you know, they have a much larger holding facility, so, okay, I think that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Ms. Bender?
I don't really have anything, but thank you. It makes sense and it is important and vital.
Thank you very much for your work on this.
Thank you.
I hope not to have to post on Facebook again. People, please don't go out and buy all the gas, because then our emergency vehicles and our school buses aren't going to be able to serve the public. And I remember having to do that back in May. So,
Yeah.
yep, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I only put one request in the CIP, and I know this was put in last year, but I did a little bit more research this year on it in the little bit of time I had after the budget cycle and startup of CIP. And so I went with the high number of, I've got a couple of quotes on it. And that by no means obligates us if we were to decide to approve this in the CIP. But I got a bid from Tyler Munis, which I know there's been a little bit of scuttle right now in with getting IT assistance on that platform, but I did talk to Robin Shugart, who used to be here in the county. She works for Fredericksburg now. They're using it. She said in the beginning it was a little bit of a hurdle, but she was liking it now. But a little bit of background: the platform that our Bright or BAI AS400 sits on was created by IBM back in the 1980s. And Mr. Bright incorporated it to use this platform for localities, and that's why it's called Bright. And he came up with that in 1999. The county started using it in 2000. So fast forward, here we are, 2021, we're using a platform that was generated in the 1980s, and we started using it in 2000. We've been using it for 21 years now. Not only does finance use it, but at one time utilities used to use it, and we've outsourced that currently. Human Resources uses it, Treasurer's Office, the Commissioner of Revenue, and the Building Department for Community Development. Finance alone uses it for accounts payable, payroll, utility billing, purchasing, and general ledger. So everything that we do essentially is in the Bright system. It served the needs of the county back in 2000, but as everyone knows, that as the county continues to grow, our needs are growing and the system is just outdated. I have previously mentioned that right now with Bright, in order to go into the fiscal year that we're in now, fiscal year 2022, we still have not got the system loaded for fiscal year 2020 until the closeout of our audit. With some of the more automated systems, you can toggle between the different fiscal years, which would be a great asset, because that way you could start your new fiscal year in the beginning. I also talked to RDA, which originally did systems for school divisions. They've now come out with a new product, RDA Breeze, for counties and municipalities. So it's a touch on, that, but expanded. I did use RDA when I worked for Colonial Beach Schools, and that system also would toggle between the years. So we would have to go out for an RFP for a product, unless I could, find, I don't know if Fredericksburg's contract has expired or some other locality. Maybe I would want to go out and look at some of those contracts and see what we could find. But so what I did was I just took the top price that I had gotten, and essentially the system, the top price was, it would cost about $701,000. But I also would like a project manager to go along with this, because when you go to implementing the new system and you've got so many different end users to come together and meet the needs of everyone. IT, as he mentioned earlier, there are only 4 people. That's not a project that they could take on, so we would need a project manager, which I have estimated around $80,000 a year for that, and that's where my numbers came from. Y'all have any questions?
Questions for Ms. Hahn? Mr. Granger?
No questions. I know we've had this previously, so I do know it's a need, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stonehill. Thank you. Ms. Bender?
Yeah, I have one question on, would that also include somebody coming and downloading the files to the newer system?
We would have to work something out with Bright, and I'm not sure what their cost would be. That's something that I would need to work on and get that. So it might be a little bit more than this.
Because that's one thing I think we need to include in there, because it's vital to have the old.
That's one of the things that's hard to do, because it depends on what platform you go with as to how much Bright will charge you for those downloads.
It makes sense. And I have to say, when I first became a supervisor and I was in community development and I saw their computer screen, I said it looked like war games from 1984. So I think it's time we updated, and 1984 was a long time ago.
Yes, I last used this platform in 1996 when I did a temporary job for Faulkner Penoplast, and so I've been used to the automated world, and then I came to King George, back to the system that I hadn't used for quite some time.
Allow me to apologize for that. But we're glad you're here, Ms. Hahn. All right. That all the questions? All right, so next steps.
Okay, so what I think that what Donna wanted to do was give you an idea of where fund balances are, because there are some funding opportunities you can see up there that would then go into capital improvement projects. And then there's another slide that she's going to have that's going to show you some of the other sources of funding that we could use for capital projects. I'll let Donna go ahead.
Okay, so this slide here comes from our fund balances as our audit completed for fiscal year 2020, with some preliminary estimates based on what our audited fund balance was at the end of last fiscal year, the carryovers, the purchase orders from the county, from the school, other operating carryovers that were requested, what our operating budget, rate stabilization fund, and then our reserve for policy of the 15% of total operating budget. So that was estimated for this fiscal year at $7.3 million in our general fund. The capital fund, of course, we take out our debt service and those projects. We have some other carryover funds that are in there, leaving about $6.8 million. Of course, those are just preliminary estimates. And as you all know, our general operating budget increased this year, so that reserve on the fund balance could be higher. Y'all have any questions on this slide? So then we looked at some potential funding sources for capital projects. Of course, you know, we put into our operating budget the $1.9 million for CIP. We still have the $1 million, and I see a typo I did right there. I put decimal instead of a comma, so that's 1 million in the gas line project. I think at one point it had 4 million, and we've used some of that over the years, and it's down to 1 million. So we still have that 1 million sitting there. Some other fund project appropriations, and these are appropriations to some projects over the years that are not encumbered. The tennis courts, as Chris mentioned earlier, that was previously approved at $250,000. So that we could go towards his new request for the $400,000 if that's the board's pleasure. Parks and Rec has in some other projects about $100,000 sitting out there as well. The Fairview Beach Stabilization Project, it's in unencumbered funds. We have about $2.5 million still in that project that could be rechanneled to something else.
How much is left of that project? I mean, where are they in terms of completion?
So can you explain what you mean by we won't need any of that? Someone?
And that's because some of it is reimbursable through a grant. But we had to put it up front.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
The EMS fire stations between, different things that were put in for those projects, there's about 550,000 sitting out there right now. Now the next one is the middle school expansion. We have about 500,000 left in that project of unencumbered funds, but that can only be used towards school projects because it was bond. And then the King George Elementary School roof replacement, we're gonna have about 1.8 million in unencumbered funds. I think the project came in way under what we estimated that it was gonna cost. And then, of course, if we can use the general fund balance if needed, any fiscal year 2021 surplus, which we will not know what that is until the audit is complete. And then I put down here the last thing, the ARP. In this current fiscal year, we received $2.1 million. 500,000 of that we've already paid for broadband initiative. So those are things that we can look at there. One of the things I wanted to talk about here was the potential ARP request. I had sent out a memorandum or an email to department heads, and Ms. Kupka mentioned it earlier that there is a revenue replacement factor in there, and that was something that I worked on really quickly, and I'm going back through and looking at that. But a large majority of our funds are counted as revenue replacement. So we not only have to use it on the broadband and the public safety and the water and sewer infrastructure, but anything that qualifies, any other project we can do if we have the funds in the revenue replacement. And so by the next meeting, I should have a more sound figure, but it is, because we'll get another 2.1 million in July of 2022 for a total of
2.6, won't we?
2.6.
Because it was 5.2, yeah.
Yeah, I think I reversed it. So, but we'll get the other half in the next fiscal year. And of those total 5.2 million, it's roughly in the neighborhood of at least 4 million in revenue replacement.
So if I'm understanding right, what you're saying then, like, since we put stuff off, like the tennis courts, because we felt like we didn't have the revenue for it, we could use the ARP money now to replace the revenue because we didn't.
That's correct. And this was also explained to us when we had a meeting with Davenport, and they actually helped me a little bit with it. And but what I had to do was I had to fiscal year 19 was a base year, and then take the revenues from fiscal year 16, 17, 18, put them in the categories that they want to see them in, and then take a half a year of 2 different half years from fiscal years.
I read it. It's
and put together. So I've done
it's
some numbers, but I'm
thank
going
you.
back through them and rechecking those numbers to make sure. But it roughly is in the neighborhood of at least 4 million.
That's great news. Great.
And so we did have some other folks who did have some requests for the ARP money. I don't know if you want to hear those now.
Yeah, I think we ought to.
Yeah.
Well, maybe what we ought to do is talk about this and focus in on the ARP, because I think you can get the ARP out of the way. You can figure out what you want to fund through ARP. We could have that be the big item, as the next meeting. And then that way, that clears up where we need to go with the CIP. Because that way, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, we got the ARP. Well, I think that's where you guys need to just give us direction of what you want to do. We do have obviously a running list from today of the projects that could potentially be ARP, but Donna does have some that, we do need to talk about. And so go ahead.
The first one is the sheriff had a meeting with Mr. Miller and myself, and he wanted to discuss the comp board is giving a bonus for deputies who are in the comp board, but a large, vast majority of his staff is not in that. So he would like ARP funding to give bonus to all of his deputies.
So can we have, did they all do a separate memo or something that we can see? Because I don't know about anyone else, but I'd kind of like to see the justification for what, rather than just have you sit here and tell us what they want. I think if there are directors and even constitutional officers who want it, I would like to see some justification beyond just you telling us what they asked for.
I can, the sheriff actually provided us with some background knowledge, and then he met with us, and then Ms. Johnson provided me with the total number, so I can get all that put together in one email and forward that to you all.
I think that would, anything you can give us would benefit our decision making. And if you can get it to us before the next, if we are, Mr. Miller, if it's consensus of the board to focus the next work session on identifying the ARP projects first, then if anything you can get to us before we sit down next time to do that, I think would be extremely helpful.
So some of this may need to ask people for a little bit more information before I pass that on to you.
Yeah, I don't know that we need to get into every request tonight then, if everyone wants to do another work.
And one of the things that I have been talking with Donna about and the others is that, your art projects need to be something, maybe do you, have I don't want to use the word a theme, but like, okay, you're going to fund law enforcement, or you're going to do service authority. I know it has some issues, or, public utilities, that kind of thing. So, keep in mind, if you can do that, I think that you don't want to like nickel and dime your ARP money. I mean, that's what your operations budgets are for. But there are some projects that could clearly, I think that we talked about that with Chris's. Maybe there's a way to work that in. Maybe there's a way with the schools, that there's some ways to do some things if you wanted to focus on some themes, I guess, if you will. That, just keep that in mind. I mean, we don't have any, it's not like we have any burning recommendations. We're all blessed with ARP, because it would be a real barren year with capital at only $2 million or less than $2 million. So, the fact that you have some other opportunities is really good. And obviously, I think that we need to remember, as Donna pointed out, the $550,000, that's school money, right? Was it 500 or 550? Or was it 400,000? 500,000. That's got to be schools. So, that there's some money there for them. The 1.8 in the roof replacement, Travis, what's the situation on that? Is that just leftover? So that would be another source of money that you could identify and earmark towards schools. So there's some flexibility there, but okay.
And so, I don't know at this point, I don't think you all are ready to decide which projects you want to move forward with. So then the next item was to set a date for the next work session, and maybe what you want to work on at that session, so that I could be prepared for any questions that you might have or any information you might need for that.
What I'd like to do for you too is to give, to kind of give you a channel, and that is, we can take the ARP money that we know, and you've seen some of it, we can kind of put it in a format, and then we can have the listing of those projects that you all are gonna get information on and that we kind of talked about tonight. And, you know, then you'll have kind of a budget or at least a proposal, and then, you can move things around. Same thing with the capital. I would like to start getting into, this is your money, this is what you guys got to do, you know, because we can talk about the merits of projects forever, but the merits of the projects end when you don't have any money. And so, you know, I think we do have some real opportunities here, but I think now we need to kind of give you some of that as well to kind of keep us on point.
Yeah, if we can do that for the next work session. Do you have any proposed dates that work particularly well for staff?
Does I don't think we have any, you know, it's up to y'all. I mean,
So we have a regular meeting next Tuesday. Do you all have any interest in meeting Wednesday for CIP, or do you want to come back the following Tuesday during the off week for a CIP discussion?
Either of those would work for me, so I leave it to my colleagues and staff what would be
Give you
best for
more
them.
time? Is it better if we give you more time with
More
everything
time
else
and
going
also
on?
2 late nights in a row are really difficult.
Well, so the following week?
Tuesdays,
The
I'm amenable
12th?
to Tuesday.
Hold on, I'm checking my schedule.
so the 12th and.
She's still checking.
I
Okay.
can't do the 12th.
What about the 13th?
Let me grab my phone.
Though I could do the 12th if we did it maybe at 7 or 6:30. Yeah, I can do it if it's a little later.
Give me a minute.
And what I would also advocate is that we would have department heads here, and that way that there's some more intensive questions that you have, or more, I was gonna say grilling, but I understand that.
In depth.
In depth. That would be appropriate at that time too, so you can get further information. And if you have any questions and you need backup on what was presented tonight, don't hesitate to contact me and Donna, and then we'll go to the department heads and get that information.
The 12th at 6:30. So for right now, we could tentatively schedule it. We are still adjourning tonight until October 5th, so it doesn't affect that tonight, and then we can just get word back and make sure everybody can be here. Does that work for everyone? Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do it that way. All right, if there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn till Tuesday, October 5th, 6 PM here in the boardroom.
6:30,
6:30.
regular meeting. 6:30. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. We are adjourned.